Hello everyone, welcome to Think Outside the Board. If it's not your first time here, then welcome back. This video is the first video in what I believe is going to be an 8-video series covering my most anticipated games of 2022. Now, the meat of this is going to be a 5-video series that I'll be looking at my 100 most anticipated games of 2022. I plan to do it 20 games per video. Before I do those 5 videos, though, I'm going to do 2 other videos looking at my 40 most anticipated expansions or reprints. But first, I'm sharing with you this video, which is going to include my 10 honorable mentions, or my 10 runners-up to my 100 most anticipated games of 2022. Now, I don't want anyone to think of these games as losers or games that didn't make it. They are just games that, for whatever reasons, I didn't choose to include with my top 100. They didn't quite make the cut. It's possible on another day, though, that some of these games might have made the cut, and a few of the games on the list might not have. Because after all, we are talking about anticipated games in 2022, so these are not games that I've played yet, which means my feelings about them are a little bit more malleable than games that I have played many times. One of the main reasons that I wanted to make this series, though, is because I play a lot of games and I make videos about games and I always have my head buried in spreadsheets and on Board Game Geek. I think probably more than most people, I have a little bit better idea of what's coming in 2022. And I've decided to do this list alphabetically. So it's not in any specific order. When I do my 100 games, they'll literally be in alphabetical order. So, there'll be 20 games from like A to G, 20 games from then on. And every next video will have the next 20 games in an overall alphabetical order. So my reason for doing that is twofold. First, because they are anticipated games and not games that I've played, I don't have very strong feelings about which games should be ahead of which games. I could pick and choose, but it would take a long time and it would ultimately be kind of arbitrary. And then you all watching this video would have this list that was just kind of a mishmash. I think when I do future video series where I'm talking about my favorite games, I am going to be ranking those, game by game. But for this series, I think it's most valuable to the viewers, to you, to do this in alphabetical order so that you can just take a quick look and see everything, and it'll be easier for you to pick out, what you want to go in and look more at on your own. Now, interestingly enough, every single game on this list is a Kickstarter. Some of them I've backed, some of them I didn't, and I will let you know which is the case as I talk about each entry. There are going to be a lot of games in my 100 most anticipated list that are retail games. But the reality here is that not every retail game that's coming out in 2022 is already announced or even listed yet on Board Game Geek. Whereas with Kickstarters, if they're supposed to deliver in 2022, chances are the campaign has already run, it's already completed, and so there are just a lot more known games in that category. In fact, there are probably very few games that would deliver from Kickstarter in 2022. It will be difficult for any Kickstarters to launch a campaign in the first few months of January and then also deliver this year, especially with the global shipping crisis and the pandemic and all of those things. Normally, I think I see that Kickstarters, occasionally they'll deliver early, but normally the range that I've seen from being a super backer is that they will deliver on time to maybe 3 months late. But as a result of the pandemic and the global shipping crisis, I'd say the average game is probably delivering 6 to 9 months late. There's too many contributing factors. And that's even bled over into retail games, where most retail games, because I do pre-order some games to try to get them as soon as they're published, a lot of the retail games are also having delays. So you might do a pre-order and then the game ends up being published and you get it 6 months late. That has not been uncommon this year. So consequently, there probably will be more Kickstarters than retail games in the top 100 list. And in this runner-up list, these are all Kickstarters. So without further ado, I'm about to give you my top 10 runners-up to my 100 most anticipated games of 2022. So the first game on this list, and these are in alphabetical order as well, is Bardwood Grove. So this is designed by Carl van Ostrand, who's designed several games. He seems to be designing right now a lot for Final Frontier games. He also worked on one of their previous Kickstarters called Merchant's Cove. It's kind of interesting that Merchant's Cove and Bardwood Grove rhyme. In fact, if you backed this Kickstarter, there was an option to get an extra character that you could bring into Merchant's Cove. Merchant's Cove is a game that uses asymmetric player abilities, very asymmetric, so every character plays very differently. So if you backed this Kickstarter, you could get yet another character to play in Merchant's Cove. That character is called the Entertainer. And this game, the new game, Bardwood Grove, has art by Mihailo Dmitrievsky, better known as the Miko, and he's done most of the art for the games coming out of Final Frontier games. Now, Bardwood Grove originally was on Kickstarter in November of this past year. It's slated currently to deliver in August of 2022. We'll see if they're able to make that deadline. I think everyone's hoping right now that the global shipping crisis will subside somewhat this year, and we'll see if that happens. But I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these Kickstarters this year continue to deliver late. Maybe a little bit less late than last year. Maybe instead of 6 to 9 months late on average, maybe they'll be doing 3 to 6 months late on average. We'll see. Even if that's the case with Bardwood Grove, it still could make it out this year if that delay is on the smaller side. Now, Bardwood Grove is both a deck building game and a tableau building game. Players are going to be playing these bard-type characters who, in Dungeons & Dragons and other fantasy games and fantasy lore, they're essentially musicians. They play things like flutes, and they sing, and they tell tales. A device called a tempo dial, it's kind of a rondelle, and players will be using that to operate their character and help them do various actions and gain various resources and abilities. Next up is Connecting Flights, which funded in May of last year, and it's scheduled to deliver in March to April of this year. This is more of a family weight game. There are things like tile placement and kind of set collection. So what you're trying to do is build up an airline network, and you're also trying to get passengers using the airplanes to various destinations. So to do that, you'll need to have tiles that include a passenger, a departure airport, an arrival airport, and a flight. And then you'll be placing these tiles in sequential order, the kind of the order of operations of these things happening. So in other words, they have to get on the plane first and disembark. There has to be a flight, a passenger, and then the plane will land. And so players will be building these kind of sets of tiles and then scoring them. There's also asymmetric player abilities in this game, and there's a solo mode, a cooperative mode, and a competitive mode. It's very much a puzzle game, so you're trying to solve the puzzles of how these flights fly, and I like the puzzle of the game that I'm seeing. I also think it's going to be a great game for lighter gamers, kind of medium light gamers, and family gamers. Following that is the Everrain, and this is probably the oldest game that was worked on, at least in this runner-up list, because the Kickstarter actually ran in 2018, and it's just been a long time producing this game, but it's finally supposed to arrive this year. Now, I did personally back Bardwood Grove. I did not back Connecting Flights, and I did not back the Everrain. But it is a co-op exploration game. There's a lot of miniatures. It's set in a universe where there is just ongoing rain, hence the name the Everrain, and there are pirates, kind of Cthulhu-like pirates. People are, I think, getting transformed into Cthulhu-like creatures in this Everrain universe. And so your job is to kind of explore and figure out the mysteries of the Everrain and maybe try to stop it. It's designed by Adam Smith, who also designed Endure the Stars and Village Attacks, and right now it's slated to deliver in June to July of this year. Now, like I said, it's not a game that I backed, so it's not going to be coming to me. And a lot of times with Kickstarter games like this, I don't really like to buy them at retail because I don't like to be cut out of all of the Kickstarter extras. So I don't know whether or not I'll get to play this game, but it looks enticing to me. It looks kind of exciting and interesting. And hopefully maybe I know somebody who backed it and I can borrow their copy and check it out. Who knows, maybe I will decide to pick it up at retail if the reviews are good once it comes out. From there, we go to Flamecraft, which is a game about dragon bakers, and it's kind of a recipe game. It's got workers, you're fulfilling contracts, and it's got really cute art from Sandara Tang that looks very Miyazaki-like. It's a very cute looking game. Again, this is probably a game that's more geared towards families and kind of medium light gamers. The Kickstarter was run by Peter Vaughn, who's now one of the 2 co-owners of Cardboard Alchemy. That's their new company. This was probably their first big Kickstarter. It did really, really well. But it was on the heels of Peter's last campaign for his previous publisher, which was Dwellings of Eldervale. And consequently, Peter's also working with Luke Laurie, the designer of Dwellings of Eldervale, on a new game sort of similar to Dwellings of Eldervale, but set in space. And that Kickstarter will be coming this year, also from Cardboard Alchemy. Now, Flamecraft was not designed by Luke Laurie, it was designed by Manny Vega. Manny Vega has designed like the Sparkle Kitty games, and Peter has also worked with him in the past. This game ran a very successful Kickstarter in September of this past year, and right now it is set to deliver in July of 2022. Next on the list is a tile drafting and tile placement game called Gartenbau. This Kickstarter ran in November of last year, which is fairly recently, just like a month or 2 ago, and it's set to deliver in September of 2022. The gameplay, I think, is fairly neat. And again, this looks to be something that's probably going to be more for the family set, the medium light gamers, but there may be enough crunch in the tile puzzle to push it a little bit more towards the medium heavy complexity level. But players are going to be getting various tiles called seedlings, and they'll be building a little tableau of tiles. And then when they get the right combinations, they'll be able to take plant tiles and place them on top of the correct seedling tiles and plant a plant on top of it. Once they do that and they satisfy the right conditions for the plant, they'll be able to take a third kind of tile, the flower tiles, and place that on top of the plants. Again, it just seems like this is a game where there's a very kind of cool puzzle going on here. In this case, it is a tile placement puzzle. Plus, it has really cool looking art. So the art here is by Matt Paquette, who has done a lot of graphic design in the past, but he's also been doing more and more artwork. And he's worked on the art for games like Merchants of the Dark Road, which is a Kickstarter that's about to deliver soon as well. If you don't hear that game on the rest of this list, it probably is in my top 100, so come back for that. He's also worked on Mystic Vale and Thunderstone Quest. And then the other artist on this is Todd Sanders, who did a game called Mr. Cabbage Head's Garden. But both of them are really great artists, and I really like their work. And I think Gartenbau is going to look very appealing, just kind of have great art throughout, and then it has this very cool kind of tile placement puzzle in it. Now, next on our list is a game that I kind of doubt it's actually going to be released in 2022, although it is listed right now as a 2022 release. And that is because it's going to be on Kickstarter. The Kickstarter has not launched yet, and it is a CMON game. And so it's going to be a big miniatures game. There's going to be a lot going on. It is currently listed in Board Game Geek as a 2022 release, which is why I'm including it here. But personally, I would be shocked if it didn't get bumped to 2023. Anyway, that game is Marvel Zombies. Now, the reason that I may not end up backing this, although it looks cool, I mean, it's a cool idea. It's Marvel, it's zombies. It's basically Marvel Zombies using the Zombicide model. But I don't necessarily love Marvel Zombies as kind of characters. I would rather have the actual Marvel characters. So I'm not sure how wrapped up I'm going to be once this launches, but I'm very, very curious to take a look at it. So it's definitely an anticipated game, even if it's a game that I end up not backing. The other thing is there's always a lot of glut and bloat to CMON's campaigns, and I'm someone who's a completist, so if I'm going to back something, I really kind of want to back everything, but it's fairly typical for CMON campaigns over the course of their run to just bulk up with all of these expansions to the point where the all-in is, you know, like a $500 pledge with shipping. So we'll see how it goes. It has my interest. I think they'll probably lose me during the run of the campaign because I'm guessing, like a lot of their other campaigns, it's just going to get very big and very expensive. Also, if you want to know which designers are behind this one, They are Fabio Curie and Michael Scheinall. Now, Fabio Curie, this appears to be his first published game. Michael Scheinall has worked on a few other things, and they include Bloodborne, the Rum and Bones series, and Xenoshift Onslaught. So if you have feelings about those types of games, that may inform whether or not this is going to be a game for you. So I'm really excited to take a look at the campaign when it launches, which should be later this month in January, and we'll take it from there. It'll either become a game I'm really excited about and I back and I get, and it becomes one of these enormous games in my collection with 10 different boxes and all these miniatures, or I'll take a look at the campaign and various elements of it will make me decide that it's not the best game to spend $500 on. But we'll see where that goes once the campaign launches in January. From there, we go to another game by Final Frontier Games. This one's called Monsters on Board. I believe it funded in September of 2020, and it's currently probably going to deliver in March of this year. This is not a game that I backed. If I also take it back a few games, I did back Flamecraft. Personally, I did not back Gartenbau, and we don't know yet whether I'm going to be backing Marvel Zombies or not. So I did not back Monsters on Board, and I think the reason for that, there were just a lot of Kickstarters at the time, and the mechanics in this reminded me of several other games that I have or that I was backing, and it also seemed maybe a little bit light for my taste. One interesting thing about the game, though, is the player boards from the graphics and the things that were shown during the Kickstarter are enormous. They're like these giant player boards, and then the main board is much smaller. So in Monsters on Board, players are going to be using dice drafting mechanics, and then they're going to have various miniatures of all these monsters on their player boards. And as they take actions and do things, they'll be moving these monsters along various tracks. So it's just interesting to me that the player boards are gigantic, and that's kind of where most of the action is happening. And it's got some pretty cool monsters in it. The art design behind it is really cool. Again, it's by the Miko. It's being published by Final Frontier Games. And his take on monsters is pretty cool. So we've seen the Miko do a lot of art for the Valeria series, for the Garpel game series, like the Of the North Sea and Of the West Kingdom games, and then the Final Frontier series. And most of those games are kind of all oriented around Vikings, kind of historical settings that lean into fantasy but aren't fantasy. So getting to see the Miko do, kind of classic monsters and Halloween type monsters is different and pretty cool, and almost enough that I backed it for that alone. So this is a game that I'm actually really excited about. I do want to play it. I just think because it's so light, it may not end up being sort of a keeper that I'd want in my collection, which is one of the main reasons I think I decided to pass on it, as well as just I'd backed a lot of stuff at the time, and I believe money was pretty tight for me at the time of this, so I had to make some hard choices. But I do have a couple friends who did back it, so I know I'll at least get to play it a few times, and I'm looking forward to it. Next up on the list is a game called Oros, and this was kind of an interesting game for me to back because it was designed by a first-time designer, a first-time artist, the same guy, so this was kind of his pet project. It was also the first time his company published a game, so a lot of firsts, which can be risky. But I really liked the graphic design of the game. I know that Richard Ham, aka Rado, really liked the game when he was playing the prototype. It has players taking actions on a player board to move a main board full of tiles all around. So you're not necessarily just shifting one tile, you're shifting entire rows and columns of tiles and really affecting that board. Also, just the art and the graphic design looked really sharp and really nice. And they had the ability to upgrade all of the tiles to these very nice looking chunky wooden tiles. They also had dual layer player boards. Really the production for Oros was just off the charts, which is just kind of amazing considering that it was mainly one guy who was the designer, the artist, and the publisher. Hopefully he pulls it all off and it's great and it looks great. This may be a game, again, that veers a little bit into the light territory for me. So once I get it and I'll play it, I'll see how enamored I am of the gameplay and the art style versus, whether it's a sweet spot in my complexity level or not. but it may be ultimately more of a game for family gamers and medium-light gamers. But when I see something that's done by a person for the first time and they've excelled so much out of the gate, from design to the visual look and style and art to the production and the components, I want to help support that person. I want them to have the chance to make their project, their passion project, and then go on to produce more games. So I'm really looking forward to Oros, but I'm kind of assuming that it's a game that maybe not too many other people will have backed, considering there's kind of such an unknown quantity here. Incidentally, the kind of tile puzzle that's going on here reminds me a little bit of games like Docmas and Tuluva. And Oros ran their Kickstarter in August of this last year. That's when it funded. And they're currently shooting to deliver it in October of 2022. The Shivers is also a game that ran their Kickstarter over a year ago in August of 2020. It's currently listed on Board Game Geek as being a 2021 game, which is not true because the Kickstarter has not delivered yet. I think they're in the process right now of starting to get it out, and I think it's likely to deliver in the next few weeks. But it has not delivered in 2021. It is going to deliver in 2022, and that's the Kickstarter version, so any retail versions will be released after that. It's true that people may have played it if they played production copies, or they may have even been able to play it on something like Tabletopia, but the actual physical game has not released yet. And currently they are shooting for a May delivery this year. Now, this is a very interesting game because it's not a game that I think is going to have heavy replay value to it. I think, again, it's going to be very aimed at kind of family and very light gamers, but it has a design element to it that is so cool that it has made my runner-up list, even though I think the game itself may be kind of thin and not have much replay value to it. And the reason that I think it's so cool and it made this list is that it is basically making pop-up books into games. So when you play this game, you're going to be going into different locations, and every location is kind of a pop-up book. And it's going to have things that you can physically interact with. You'll be able to look around a room and open drawers and cupboards. And it's essentially an exploration game, so you're looking around the room for clues. It sounds really cool, and I think it would be a great game to play with younger kids. But I think what's going to happen with it gameplay-wise is that because it is a pop-up book and everything is designed, it's permanent, if you go replay it later, you're already going to know the kind of different places that you might look for clues. The gameplay itself is going to be kind of on rails. You're going to know where you can go and look for clues. You're going to know the things that you can do, and it'll almost be like a speed through of a very light game. So I won't know until I play it, and I did not back this one, so it's not coming to me. I don't know if I'll be able to get my hands on it or not. I would like to play it, obviously, because it looks so cool. I'd like to play it at least once, but I won't know until I do, if I do, my ability to give feedback on what the replayability is ultimately going to be for this one. I just suspect it's going to be low, but maybe like me, you're so enamored of the art and the design to it that it's something that you want to at least seek out and maybe play someone else's copy, or maybe pick up, your own copy and just accept the fact that it's not going to have possibly, heavy replay value and that it's going to be a very light game. The last game on this list is a game called Transmissions, and it is a game designed by Adam West. Not the Batman from the 60s, but the game designer who's worked on games like Deadline, Galactic Emperor, and Ninjato. And it is based on the work of an artist named Matt Dixon. He's done some board game work in the past. He's also worked on like the Harry Potter franchise in various kinds of ways. I'm not sure what games or marketing he worked on, but he did work on Harry Potter in some way. He also worked back in the day on the Crash Bandicoot series and the Spyro series video games. And he's created this series of sort of comic books, graphic novels called Transmissions. So basically Adam West knew of his art, really liked it, and wanted to design a board game around it. Now, this is again a very kind of light game, family-friendly game. It's got very, very cool miniatures that have been designed and sculpted to look like Matt's art. And you're going to be doing a variety of kind of basic mechanics in this game. Things like worker placement, there's a rondel, you're going to be doing some resource management and set collection. And you'll also be using cards to move your worker around this area, your cool little sculpted Matt Dixon miniature. You'll be using cards to move him around the board. So it just looks like a really, really nice, solid, lighter weight game, family weight game that also teaches a variety of mechanics in a very kind of simple, basic way. Now, like the Shivers, this isn't a game that I back personally, but because of the art, I'm really interested in it. Hopefully I'll be able to find a copy, give it a play or two, but it seems like it's probably a little simple for my tastes and my collection. But I think for a lot of people, this may be a great game. So there you have it. Those are my top 10 runners-up to my 100 most anticipated games of 2022. Now, over the next week or two, I'll be putting out more videos. First, you will see the 2 videos in which I cover my top 40 most anticipated expansions and reprints or later versions of games. And after those 2 videos are published, you'll then see a series of 5 videos, each covering 20 entries in my 100 most anticipated games of 2022. So come back over the next couple weeks in the new year, check it out, see what I think is cool in 2022, and hopefully you will have a bunch of discoveries of games that are coming in this year that'll lead you towards purchases you may want to make or games you want to have on your radar. But I think this is going to be a really fun series. I'm really looking forward to sharing these games with you. I'll also be putting out another Kickstarter weekly video at the end of the weekend. And in closing, I'd just like to wish everybody a Happy New Year. I hope you get to play lots of great games. I'd like to thank you very much for watching this video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, especially if you think you might be interested in this series and you want to keep tabs on it. And thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Take care.